affects whatever the experimenter or the observer comes into contact with. Well, when you have a consciousness of peace, when you go out with that kind of energy, you have an effect. And you have an effect on so many other things too. And it doesn't matter, it's not that you have to do something, although what will come out of your peacefulness, the things that you do, will certainly have an effect. But you don't have to say anything. You don't even have to do anything. Just holding that energy, holding those thoughts, affects everything around you. You may know of what is sometimes called chaos theory, which has always amused me that they have this name. It's also called, and I think this is a better name for it, the butterfly effect, that says that what happens in another part of the world affects something clear across on the other side, affects everything. The wings, the beating wings of a butterfly, that's where the butterfly effect comes into play, has an effect on the beating of wings of a butterfly in the rainforests of Brazil, has an effect on our lives here in the United States, and so on and so forth. But the scientific term for it is chaos theory. And it's just interesting that that's how it's perceived, as being chaotic. That because you don't understand what all the effects of something are, because you can't control it, it seems chaotic. But it is anything but chaotic. The butterfly effect describes how a small change in one state of a system can result in differences in a later state. For instance, as I said, butterfly flapping its wings in, say, China can have an effect that causes a hurricane in Texas. So, of course, for those of a empirical mindset who are trying to control everything, that would be chaos, because you can't. You can't stop that butterfly from flapping its wings. It kind of sets determinism, the idea that future behavior is determined by certain conditions with no random elements involved, kind of sets that on its ear. And that's a lot of the basis of a lot of traditional science, is determinism. But that's already been set on its ear by what we've discovered in quantum physics. As I said several times in this episode, that what we do, what we are aware of, what we turn our attention to, affects what we are paying attention to. That the observer affects the observed. And so, to those who believe in determinism, something like the butterfly effect is deterministic chaos. The definition being that when the present determines the future, but the approximate present does not approximately determine the future. Okay, that's science for you. But in any case, how you perceive, how you proceed, the thoughts you hold in mind affect the world. And I talk about this because this is a time this week when we are sort of observing the anniversary of September 11th, 2001, a time when a terrible tragedy occurred. The bringing down of the Twin Towers, the attack on our country with malevolent intent. At this time, it's a time when we think about peace, when we think about service, giving to others. Those who committed those acts on September 11, 2001, thought they were doing something. They thought they were doing something noble. They also thought they were doing something that would cause harm. But although they meant it for evil, or they meant it for their purposes, we have taken it and we have turned it into a moment of inspiration, a guiding light, if you will. And those people that gave up their lives to create this event, this guiding light for us, I believe that's why those souls did that. I believe that as on our highest level, we choose how we go out of this particular world. And we choose, or some choose, to be part of events like 9/11. And I'm talking again on the highest level, not on, the mundane level. No one would choose to die like that. But from our highest level, the level that understands that we don't die, that we live and we take different forms. On that level, those souls chose to be guiding lights for us. And I think it's humbling and amazing to honor their sacrifice, as well as the sacrifices of those who tried to save them, those who tried to be heroes to help. The remembrance of 9/11 brings all of that. And most of all, it brings an understanding, a desire for peace. If you can see peace in the world, when all you're hearing about is turmoil, well, then you are on your way. Because underneath it all, beyond it all, once you take that step back, it is all peace. The rest is illusion. When I was in college, there was a book that I read with my college roommate that we were both fascinated by. It was called Changing My Mind Among Others, and it was written by Timothy Leary. And it was a book about consciousness, and it was a book about the use of psychedelics to help people change their consciousness, change their awareness. It was a book that changed my life. And I realized that I was among the luckier people in that I didn't need to use chemicals to reach a state like that. that I could go into meditation, and being as sensitive as I am, I was able to go into meditative states, go into different states of consciousness, if you will, a higher state of consciousness, through that, without having to use chemicals. I didn't need them, but others do. The reason being that, you can get so frozen in a particular way of being, or a particular belief system, or just in the world and how the world expects you to be and expects you to behave, that for many it's not very easy to change their minds. And it's for those people that these kinds of experiments, this kind of treatment, these kinds of chemicals can really help. Some of the more touching and profound research that is being done has to do with terminal patients who are facing, the end of their lives, and how these chemicals help them to open up, accept what's happening to them, understand from a much different perspective what's happening, by eliminating the fear of it, and by experiencing dimensions that help them to understand that there is more beyond the physical. That's the tragedy of, the belief in bodies, belief in the physical above all else, because the physical does end. And if you believe that that's all there is, well, then that's it. And some people are comfortable with that because it makes things easier for much of their lives. But when you're coming to that end, that's when it gets difficult. That would be the reason why many people convert as they or begin to find or if they say find God or find a sense of spirituality as they approach the end, because it's really hard to hold on to that belief in bodies when that body is fading away. Right? Okay. So I want to wrap up this particular discussion by and had meant to do this last week, because we're into autumn now. We're into the back to school and back to work and routines, and this can often be a stressful time. So I mentioned last week and didn't have a chance to get back to it, so I want to talk about ways you can reduce stress in your environment, and helpful things you can do to help boost your immune system so that you can have more resilience, if you will. So when things get hectic at home, it can really impact your health. So your home should be a place where stress can be left at the door, you and your family. And I think it's important, if you have children sharing your home, that you show them how to do this. Really important, because you may look at your children as sort of a source of the hecticness, but they need your help too in understanding how to leave that at the door. So there are things you can do. You can bring the outdoors inside, green plants and flowers and bulbs, anything that is of beauty from outdoors, and you can bring it indoors, so you can have elements of nature around you. Sometimes you can pick up like a little rock fountain